Kia koutou. Welcome to our Operations and Monitoring Committee meeting. Thank you for the slightly changed start time. We welcome those who are live streaming in, and today, due to the COVID restrictions, we also have some people joining us online on Zoom. So we'll do our best. If you do have a question, I've got a screen in front of me for those who are Zooming. Just put your hand up either through the little emoji or your physical hand, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Just like to remind everyone, this meeting is live streamed. Please have your mobile phones off on silent, and if need be, we will take an afternoon break around 2:30 as well. On the Zoom, we have our Mayor Steve Chadwick, Jocelyn Makaire, and also our Chief Executive, Jeff Williams. I'd like to ask our Deputy Chair, Councillor Yates, if she would please open our meeting with a karakia.
Kia ora, nō reira, kia hihiri tātou. Tūtaua mai I runga, tūtaua mai I raro, tūtaua mai I roto, tūtaua mai I waho kia tau wai, te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumie, huie, tai ki.
Kia ora, Councillor Yates. I'd like to call for apologies. I do have apologies from Mrs. Rothwell and also for Councillor McPherson for early departure. Do we have any others? There appear to be none. Well, I'll just get a mover and a seconder. Anyway, on the apologies, moved Councillor Bentley, seconded Mr. Waru. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. Any declarations of interest this morning? There appear to be none. I now move to urgent items on the agenda. Is there anything anyone wishes to raise? Yes, Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to share some news with those around the table today. Some really unfortunate news that came out yesterday afternoon that Jonathan Tim had unfortunately passed away. And those that have known Jonathan, he was just recently appointed QC in Rotorua. He was the first Rotorua-based lawyer to be appointed in 25 years. He was a two-term Board of Trustees member of John Paul College, and I've had the privilege of having him as a mentor. And so I'd just like to acknowledge our condolences for him, for his whānau, and send our thoughts as a council as well.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wang, and I believe Steve wishes to add something to that as well. Your worship.
Thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you very much, and in honour of him, I'd just like to have a moment silent, please. Thank you very much. Thank you. Were there any other urgent items on the agenda? Yes, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yesterday, all councillors received an email from Rotorua Lakes Council regarding a break in our wastewater main that had been addressed in the Noataha area. I've been made aware that there have been some misleading statements contrary to the content of that email made on social media by a councillor. And so I'd just like to signal that in his operational report on page 55, I'll be asking the GM Infrastructure to provide clarity around the actual circumstances or the reasons behind that break and how it was remedied. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. We'll take that as an urgent item, and I think you are right. We'll go into the detail in the report. Sorry, Your Worship.
Yes, thank you for parking it into the detail of the report. But I've looked at the allegation made on the website, and it is factually incorrect. And I wish to serve notice here that I demand an apology and a retraction of that statement on the RDR website, and will consider further action. So I understood Councillor McPherson taking early leave, but I wanted that put up front prior to going into the operations.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just like to mention that Councillor McPherson, who we're speaking of, is not currently present in this meeting. So I don't feel comfortable we don't give him the opportunity to speak. However, given the misleading information, I think it is worthwhile putting it down as urgent item. And sorry, Councillor Donaldson, if you could please just provide some context or what the urgent item or point of order may be in terms of raising it at the meeting. I'm not aware of what has actually been said.
So, Madam Chair, through you, the pānui yesterday from Council was that the break was as a result of some inadvertent action, possibly by a contractor, which caused a wastewater main to deteriorate over time. However, the words used on social media are that the pipe broke because our council has not invested enough in maintenance. So I would like that clarified because I am aware of significant investment in maintenance and adherence to asset management plans, but I'll let the GM Infrastructure comment in his report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. I think there's enough now for the urgent item. We'll move on and we can speak to it in more detail. But as the Chair, I would like to rule that does be noted as an urgent item with the detail around precisely what was, well, quite frankly, a lie. I am very disappointed that that has been claimed. That's certainly not the truth, and I will give our GM of Infrastructure the opportunity to correct that for the public record. And at some stage, I would also like to allow Councillor McPherson the opportunity to explain why he chose to make such misleading information, and also allow him the opportunity to apologise and withdraw for that. And that will be my ruling for that. So we will move on. Was there any other urgent items? There appear to be none. Okay, well, we will now move to page 6 in our report, confirmation of minutes. I ask for a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the Operations and Monitoring Committee meeting on the 4th of Feb be confirmed as true and correct record. Moved Councillor Yates, seconded Mr Hurd. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you. Staff reports. We move to page 10. And we have the operational updates for Council from our CCOs. So again, a mover and a seconder that the report operational updates for Council from Rotorua Economic Development Limited, Infracore Limited and Rotorua Airport Limited be received. I have moved by Mr Waru, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. I'd like to invite our first person up today, Andrew Wilson from Rotorua Economic Development, to speak to a presentation, and welcome as well to John McRae. I believe he has some videos for us today as well. Excellent. So we are on pages 11 to 18. Thank you. Over to you guys.
Yeah, nothing like a little bit of visual action to sort of keep everyone awake. Hey, I just sort of wondered if it was worthwhile, before Andrew gets into the detail of what we're doing within Rotorua Economic Development, which will take the report as read, just give a little bit of a setting of the scene, what's happening around us, because that sets the context to what we need to do in terms of our response to encourage, obviously, economic development. Conscious that I won't take a lot of time to do this either. But on the positive side, you know, there's anything that's to do with forestry and processing. It's been a stellar year. We see just in the last couple of days that A-grade logs have lifted to 145, which is significantly at the top of what we would expect. And there's strong demand out and strong pipeline out further. Within our other important areas, obviously through dairy, at the moment Fonterra is sort of forecasting a $7.50 payout, but with the GDT lifting the other day by 14%, we can actually see there's strength in that milk price lifting as well. So the primary sector on a whole is doing extremely well, and one of the problems they've got is actually finding talent to bring into their organisations and keep their organisations pumping along. So that's a good challenge for them. Professional services like myself and all the rest of it, we're also having a good year. There's no problems here. There's a lot of activity because of what's happening in the primary sector and development. Property development, you would say, is probably it's high demand, but perhaps constipated would be the best way of phrasing it, which there needs to be a lot of help there to actually get things moving, literally. And I think lastly, and the reason I've left this to last, is that tourism. Tourism, on the other hand, is not in a good shape. We've had a really bumpy period. We had a bit of a lift when everyone got excited after the lockdown and spent quite a bit of money down here and around about. The New Zealand behaviour as a tourist is that they want to go and see many places. So our iconic brands like Rotorua and Queenstown are not getting the volume traffic that you'd want. So right across the board, we're seeing a slowing of domestic travel, but particularly for Rotorua and Queenstown, we are the areas that are struggling the most because we've got assets that are built for a high volume, and yet we're not obviously going to see that high volume probably for up to 2 years. We can expect the borders, hopefully, at best, open in 1 year to 18 months, but then we've lost a lot of infrastructure to get people here. That's the booking systems, the travel systems, all those sorts of things. So that could be another 6 months to a year before we start getting volume, all things going well. So it's really challenging, and it's been now, but we've seen a lot of little organisations go by the way. They will not come back in the tourism sector. We are now seeing some of our bigger brands who have had strong balance sheets now starting to come under pressure. The mum and dad businesses who are working as, just that, mum and dad trying to keep the business going, are stretched mentally and physically to just try and keep their organisations going. So tourism's in quite a state. And one of the things that, and I'll hand over to Andrew soon, for us, our support around economic development in that one sector is that we need to think about how our product is fit for purpose and work with everyone within the tourism community to make sure that we've got a product that is fit for not just now but into the future. It's hard to see a future that has the same sort of volume mix that we've had in the past, and quite honestly, on a personal level, I don't think we want to see that sort of volume. We want to see product that has high value and lower volume, and that should be the aim of our future, and I think I've said that before. So that sort of fits in very nicely to what Andrew's going to present a little bit later on. So on the whole, the economy's doing pretty well because of our primary sector. There are areas that are having record years, and we need to play to our strengths. So within economic development, we're considering a lot about those areas that are doing well and how do we accentuate their growth and how do we accelerate what they're doing. So that's where a lot of our thinking is going, as well as trying to help the tourism sector rethink what the product is for now and to the future. So hopefully that's a good lead in, Andrew, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, John. So as John mentioned, we'll take the report as read and just touch on a couple of kind of highlights that weren't in the report. Mindful that we work in a pretty dynamic environment, so there's a couple of things that have happened probably quite recently that we'll just touch on that would probably seem like old news by the time we come back and report next time. One of the things that we progressed late last year was we went through a organisational change. So we did restructure our operations to better align with the expectations that were set by you. There's a couple of key things to take away from that. One is that we've now got a much stronger focus on project delivery. And I think as John's kind of alluded to, we're working really hard behind the scenes to try and remove, and I won't use his word, but the constipation that is occurring in some areas about how do we really drive those things along and push them quickly. The other change that we've made is that we've pulled together all of our destination marketing activities. They were a little bit confused in terms of where they were getting delivered. There's now kind of a strong integration of those, and we're really focused in terms of, if we're talking about destination marketing, it is truly about marketing the destination in its overall form. So that means whether it's a live, work, invest, do business, and for the range of economic sectors that we deliver to. So again, we've just sort of working through the recruitment process for last couple of positions, but certainly if you're subscribed to our emails, you'll get some profiles of the people that are going into those roles. The other thing that we're just working our way through at the moment is we're looking to rationalise our some of our cost structures. So we're looking to move our office down into the I-site. So again, it's for those of you who've been up into our office on level 3 and on Haupapa Street, we'll be looking to sublease that off to another business and move ourselves down into the I-site environment, both from a cost-saving perspective, but also in terms of getting everyone under one roof. There's certainly some benefits in terms of utilising the resource across the team a little bit more effectively. John's kind of touched on the tourism space. So look, this is data that we've been producing for the tourism sector on a weekly basis. Basically, it gives you a forward-looking view in terms of what's happening with bookings. We've very quickly gone back into the seeing some positive activity on weekends. Obviously, this last one was impacted by the lockdown in Auckland. But looking out ahead, Easter is looking positive. And I think the timing of the first school holidays this year is also positive. There's about a 2-week delay in there. So we will see, hopefully, a bit of a pick-up through that period for some of those businesses. And last slide from me, and then we'll take some, I think we've got a video and then happy to take questions. Business events is definitely a bright spot for this sort of coming winter. So Jolene and the team over at the Energy Event Centre have done a fantastic job in terms of selling that site or that facility. There's a really good, strong kind of uplift coming for this winter. Our assessment would be we're likely to be short of accommodation some weeks through the middle of winter, which is a positive sign. The trick will be how do we make sure we extract maximum value from those visitors to the destination, and that's certainly something the team's kind of thinking through at the moment. Related to that, our business events team, who kind of operate like a convention bureau for Rotorua, traditionally we'd played probably in the trying to attract around about 150 packs and above conference activity. We've kind of flipped that around at this point. We're really focused in terms of team building and incentives. So we know there's a lot of the corporates through Auckland and so forth who would have had incentive or the kind of like reward type experiences where they took them off to the islands or Australia to reward their sales teams or marketing teams. We're hunting after that stuff at the moment. And so we've got a campaign that literally just launched Tuesday. It's got a couple of videos that have been driven out through LinkedIn, and the heavy focus here is really kind of generating tangible leads locally. But the other reason I just wanted to show them, or one of them to you, was they're far more reflective of where we're trying to land the destination brand. So I'll just let that play. Thanks, Hilda.
Through work we prosper. The best rewards in life are memorable experiences. Create your next incentive experience in Rotorua.
So, yeah, happy to take questions.
That was very cool. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome, John and Andrew. Thanks for your presentation and the report. Certainly concur that Jolene's presentation at the Business Events Forum yesterday was a standout, and I think she mentioned that people attending conferences here on average spend something like $467 a day in our economy. So great work for her team. My question was on in our report regarding the destination management plan with Messrs Bamford and Sapsford working on that. What's the time frame for that plan being rolled out? And will it come out as a draft, or will we see a final plan from them?
Yep, good question. It is a reasonably in-depth process. So from memory, the plan will be ready in around August. There's a lot of consultation that's going on in terms of building that up. We've had the first steering group meeting, I think it was around about 2 weeks ago. We've got a really highly engaged group of people sitting around the table helping to guide that, but certainly the number of people that I've seen that are in the engagement kind of list is quite overwhelming. There's a lot of sessions to run, so we're making sure that it's really complete in terms of everyone who's to speak to. So probably August, Dave. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your Worship?
Oh, good, it's strange sitting here, I must tell you all. Thank you, John and Andrew, for coming. And I've got a couple of questions, and we're very aware of how difficult going forward is for our operators locally. But is there any infrastructure that is at risk? And I was glad to hear you say, John, that you're going to the eyesight, because that's a vulnerability that I think is of great concern. It might be hard to stand up again if we've got this year ahead of us. So what infrastructure is feeling vulnerable at the moment? And also, what sort of yield did we get from that RTO investment? And is the Tourism New Zealand ad saying go to the city having an impact on us?
There's 3 questions there, I think, Steve. But
I think there might have been 5.
5 questions. Happy to try and work my way through, and you can nudge me if I forget one. Working backwards, look, in terms of what assets are at risk, probably not one for us to, some of that information is probably commercial in confidence, and probably not something we'd really want to be sharing openly at this point. Needless to say, I think John alluded to it, there are some reasonably sizable businesses that had weathered it, I think, the first 12 months, and they're now starting to find it is getting tougher and tougher in terms of where do they go next. In terms of the Tourism New Zealand current approach, to be perfectly blunt, the best thing they could do is probably stop marketing. It hasn't necessarily done us any favours, and our observation would be I don't think it's necessarily actually increased the size of the pie in terms of domestic visitation at all. They would give you a contra view, but that's certainly where we sit. That's probably the case. The MB funding has certainly been really helpful in some respects. So it's allowed us to get on and to create assets like the business events video that you just saw. It's funding, obviously, the creation of this destination management plan. We're doing quite a bit of work in terms of making sure that our destination brand reflects who we are and who we aspire to be as a place. So from that perspective, it's been really helpful. On the flip side, it has delivered a lot of funding to a lot of other RTOs around the country who are now all frantically advertising for domestic visitors. So it has made it a pretty cluttered marketplace in terms of you've only got to open a magazine or turn on a social media channel, and I'm sure you will have had 3 or 4 different ads from a couple of other destinations. So that's the marketplace we kind of operate in.
Good luck to our Ironman team this weekend, who I hope are in their element.
Yeah, 100%.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Donaldson and Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just another question through you. I was intrigued by the Eyesight NZ Central Call Centre trial that you're running. So is that a revenue earner for our eyesight? How does that work? Do we man a phone or 24 hours or what?
Yeah, no, certainly not 24 hours. We've been trialling it as an add-on within our existing staffing levels to see whether or not it did generate revenue. We've kind of given those guys a bit of a free rein to go and try some things, and if we can generate some additional revenue through their activities, that's fantastic. I think it's been a bit of a slow burn. It's another one of those ones where potentially Tourism New Zealand haven't recognised the asset that they've actually got in terms of the eyesight network, and I don't know if they've necessarily done as good a job as they could have pushing people towards that through that channel. So yeah, we're certainly looking again at that at the moment about whether we continue it or whether we pull the pin on it.
Thank you. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, John. Thank you, Andrew. John, very impressed with your quick summary on the landscape of how Queenstown and Rotorua, particularly great tourist destinations, affected. To add a little bit of fire to that, last week Thursday, I was on 8th Street. On one side, there was an opening of a soft opening of a bar, full of people, lots of activity. On the other side of 8th Street, at about 20 to 9, things were starting to die down. At 10 to 9, a lot of them had started to put their boards down. They've had a good summer, particularly from Thursday to Sunday. My question being is that although we know now that tourists are staying away from Rotorua, particularly because they want to discover the rest of New Zealand, will the aid that we've got, as sparkling as it looks and as dazzling as it looks, will that help to ease what we're going to be into a bleak, long winter? I don't want to be a pessimist over here, but in summer we had seen when we went through the redwoods at night up till 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. I know 2 nights where lots of guests that had come to our place had gone there, waited for so long, the waits were an hour, and they came back only to go back the 3rd day and be successful. So places like that are what people want to come and see, I believe. Then some of the Rotorua, everybody knows, is full of lakes, as peaceful, serene, as adventurous as it is. Something for me was missing in that aid, and I believe it didn't connect to the real people that we're trying to sort of get back to Rotorua.
I guess it comes down to, what I touched on, a definition of product. And when you talk about a product, it's about the consistency of every minute that you experience. And if we're talking about Rotorua as a destination and a product, you then have to think about, okay, every engagement I have, not just that food and beverage, but in the retail store, within, the mountain biking fraternity, and every experience that you have as a visitor has to be on point. And, one of the things that we talked about briefly was, what do we do in terms of ensuring we've got great capability within our people who are really they are the ones who make the difference. They are the ones who give you that, ultimate experience. And I was just talking to the guys the other day as an example. I was down, and I'm always a strong advocate of Rotorua mountain biking. So I was down in Havelock, and we just bumped into a local. And all I needed to do was talk about 5 minutes about what a great place Rotorua is. The tracks are way awesome. The tracks are sticky. They've got the right amount of moisture and everything compounded within that dirt, which makes a fantastic ride. And you just go deeper and deeper into that conversation. And lo and behold, before you know it, we're swapping numbers that he's going to be staying up here for a while and he'll bring all his mates. Now, if you've got someone with that sort of capability, or everyone with that sort of capability telling our story, then all of a sudden you've got quite a different sort of momentum within what our branding is. And that's all free. We don't have to spend millions of dollars on adverts and campaigns. We just need to make sure that our people are on point And our product, like our hotels, our, you know, everything that you see around the city, everything you see in the forest is optimised. And one of the things we also talked about is, you know, there's a bit of a criticism that the mountain biking market doesn't really contribute a hell of a lot in terms of, you know, money to the whole economy. And there's the other side of that coin is we actually don't do enough to extract value out of those mountain bikers. You know, secret spot, treetops, those sort of things. They're winners. You know, they were products that no one thought would extract good value from that market group. And that's where we need to be thinking. We need to be thinking about how do we actually have product that is, you know, really fit for purpose and actually makes the most of the tourists that come here, and make sure that they get the most out of us when they come here and want to tell everyone about our story. So that's what I mean by product.
Thank you. And I do think that the video that you mentioned as well, it is a business events targeted video. Yeah, so, and I think it's actually really awesome, so good job on that. We have a supplementary question from Councillor Donaldson, then we'll go Councillor Bentley, Mr Hurd, then Mr Waru.
You answered my question, Madam Chair. That is, my understanding, a business events targeted video as opposed to find your element. I know where Councillor Kumar's coming from, and I agree. You know, the wider tourism offering is much well, but that's a targeted video.
Yeah, and sorry, and certainly just adding to that, Dave, we are working through how what we replace Find Your Elements with at the moment. I'd echo your thoughts on that, Councillor Kumar, that we haven't done a good job of reflecting the people of this place as much as we could, and certainly that's something that we're really focused on at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Thank you, John and Andrew, for another wonderful presentation. It's always a pleasure to hear your thoughts. With regard to our fairly recently acquired reputation for homeless, do you think this is having an effect on New Zealand tourism for our city?
Yeah, look, I'd like to say something other than yes. Of course it does. Yeah. It is, and I had a conversation the other day at the chamber event, and you know what we're seeing in the streets reflects in the very product that we have. So you know it is. If I go back to, and I'll just speak purely from a business point of view rather than a social point of view. You know, from a business point of view, it is detracting from our product, and we've spent 100 years building Rotorua as a destination, and the brand that sits behind that is of a lot of value. It is, Queenstown and Rotorua are the two big brands that represent New Zealand, and yet we're in a situation where the homeless situation is detracting from what is an iconic brand and depreciating that brand, quite frankly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As a supplement for you, could you organise a workshop or discussion at some stage in the future with regard to our problem?
Sure.
I think, Madam Chair, we've had those workshops through the long-term plan, and the long-term plan forums addressed community leadership in terms of community safety and also around housing and a housing strategy, and they were rolled out in the draft consultation document. So we as a council have had those workshops here.
And I'll just take a question on that from Steve about the workshops. Unmute.
Yes, in our LTP workshops, we held 2 workshops in December, one around homeless and housing and one around community safety. That was for all elected members, and some chose not to come. So I believe we've got the right approach of taking those out as 2 key issues in our LTP that's about to go out. We share your concerns, John, about the reputation, about the need for addressing the issues, and those that attended the workshops, and I'm sure the LTP will actually help us with our response. So I don't see at this stage a workshop is needed. We had it as part of our elected member responsibilities.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do still think it's a valid request, so we'll take your request, and when we come back with a consultation from the LTP, as you mentioned, the response will then be decided on. So that'll be the opportunity for us to really look at the problem in its full context and be able to find a good solution. Thank you, Councillor Bentley, for raising that issue. We go to Mr. Waru.
Tēnā koe te tiamana, o tira kia korua. Andrew, John, I'm Henry kia korua. Hey, yeah, I think I was just going to say, geez, I thought that was a great video, eh, Uncle Trev? Especially that waiata, oh, it's a killer. Engari, Māori mahi, Māori ora, e pai tērā, and I do take Councillor Kumar's comments too. He tika tāna, he's right about that, you know, a bit more of us, but that's aimed at a specific market. So I think if you might have explained that at the start, he might have understood the whole kaupapa. Hoi anō, mine's only short really, it's about the Rotorua Reorua. You know, that's a kaupapa nui tērā. Has there been any thought of injecting some of that kaupapa into your communications and your marketing plans? Kia ora.
Yep, look, that's a good question, and the simple answer is yes. So, and that is something we're absolutely working through at the moment.
It is a good question. Thank you. Mr. Hurd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tēnā korua. I want to go back to something that you said, John, in your very succinct summary of the situation, if I may, please. You talked about the three primary drivers of the Rotorua economy, and you said that two were going well and one's having problems. And I think we all agree with that. It was a very succinct summary. And you also went on to say that maybe we should be looking for opportunities in the other two. And I just want to pick up on that. Because I think if we look this far ahead, all we can see is COVID, and we get in a very negative mindset because it is hammering our tourism industry big time. That will be dealt with ultimately by the health authorities and the government, and we'll do what we can to get from here to there. But if we look beyond the immediate and look out into a little bit further ahead, I think Rotorua is probably one of the best positioned cities in the world to take advantage of the emerging drivers of the international economies, and I refer to sustainability and climate change. And we've got a wood first policy in Rotorua. We've got government has now adopted a wood procurement policy for its own building activity. And we've got the heart of the universe here for plantation forest in the form of Scion. Scion has biomaterial strategies. Biomaterials are a surrogate word for plastic substitutes. We think engineered wood, we think of steel and concrete substitution. We think biomaterials, we think plastic substitution, and also bioenergy for fuel substitution. Sitting right here, we've led the world since the early 1900s in these fields. And we are positioned to pick up on those and capitalise on the emerging environment. And I think we really need to start putting some resources into those areas.
Yep. Yeah, I can provide a really brief comment, Bryce. So this is certainly something which we continue to work away on. And, you know, literally yesterday had a reasonably lengthy conversation with the Minister around, a proposal to put a bioproducts pilot plant here in Rotorua. So speaking exactly to that. I think it's one of those areas where you're right, still do have significant sort of growth opportunities, and there's certainly some lessons we've learned, I think, probably as a destination around our own wood first policy that, is encouraging central government to kind of take a look at and understand where there's some pitfalls. So look, that's an area that we'll be definitely putting some energy into over the next 6 months. I'd sort of add, I think, that one of the other things that we're really focused on is it's okay for us to keep going, we're going to do this and this and this. We're still a pretty small team, and our reminder is that actually if we don't have some more houses and we don't have the land available for businesses to actually locate on, then some of those things aren't that relevant. So, as a primary kind of goal, it really does come back to making sure that we've got houses, and that we've actually got land available for businesses to do business on.
Thank you very much. We'll move on and just remind councillors that to ask questions as briefly as possible, please. So we have Councillor Wang, Councillor Maxwell, and then Councillor Kai Fong. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora korua. I just had two questions. I'll be pretty brief. The first one was about the summer intern program that I see in the report. I'm a huge supporter of that, and so doing something like this, I think, will retain our local talent and our people. Would you be able to explain a bit further on that program?
Look, that was something which was proposed in our original statement of intent, and when we had a look at what our priorities were for the year and what resource we had available, it's just something that we were unable to deliver, and given everything else that we've been asked to do. So certainly that was a signal we've provided back to you as the shareholder that we're unable to deliver that program. Certainly we'd be happy to look at it in the future, but when we contrast all the competing, and it's a very long list of things we're asked to do, that was one that was just simply not able to achieve.
Thank you, and I guess that kind of relays onto my second question. I know, as you've explained and as we have all seen and experienced, that we've been severely affected by, in terms of tourism and hospitality. Has this had any effect on staffing?
Staffing at within
yes,
economic development?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll move to Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, John and Andrew, for the presentation this morning. Before my question, I want to acknowledge also the mahi that Jolene's doing down there at our in our events and that down there through these tough times. A good example is towards the end of this month, March the 20th, we've been running around trying to look at other dates because of the levels being changed to postpone. We've had to postpone it to another time, possibly, depending on this weekend, the 20th of March. And talking with Jolene throughout April, throughout May, there's obviously something's working. It was just not a date left and that there, so I thought, keep that up. And the other one is the business events video. I like the use of a lot of the young people that are in there, because during COVID, and we got no international ones coming through the border, they're not afraid to travel. Some of us hold back a little bit, but they're not afraid. And the question I've got is, when are you moving over into the eyesight, which I think is a good move?
Look, we're just working through the detail on that at the moment. It's going to require building consent and a few other things.
Building consent.
Yeah, just they're non-structural walls, but all of that kind of stuff, given the fire layouts and so forth, just need to go through the proper process. So,
thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just perhaps a comment rather than a question. I'd just like to thank both John and Andrew for the work that they've done, and also the board that sits in behind you, John, that supports you. And we're about to lose Ganesh shortly, so would like to publicly thank him for the work that he's done in supporting Rotorua and the Rotorua Economic Development Unit. And just to congratulate you on actually delivering quite a good result, considering that it's been quite difficult times and there's been a diverse list of things that you're having to deliver on. And so, John and Andrew, hopefully by next time your report will be needing lots of toilet paper, because you will have got rid of that constipation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, guys. I'd now like to invite our Chief Executive of Infracore Limited, Matt Scott, to the table, and we are on page 20 to 29. Welcome, Matt.
Kia ora. Okay. Here today delivering the results for quarter 2, financial year 21 for Infracore Limited. Here we go. So starting off with the social enterprise elements of Infracore. So, operating as a dual bottom line business, I've previously reported work underway with the Ministry of Social Development and the Corrections Department Last month, I reported that we was working with on a memorandum of understanding with corrections to finalise processes and pathways for post-offenders to rehabilitate back into the workforce and you know, provide opportunities to get back into the mahi and be able to contribute towards their own livelihoods, gain skills and experience that could either allow them to stay in Infracore or to move on to other opportunities with a CV and references, etc., etc. That's now been signed, sealed and delivered, is in place, forms part of our business as usual recruitment process and with a high level of engagement there. I also reported that we're in negotiations with the Ministry of Social Development on an actual contract which is based upon sustainable work opportunities, taking people off of the benefit regime, bringing them into a workplace and delivering to them a pre-prescribed pathway to develop skills in either parks and open spaces or into utilities, supported by formal NZQA training opportunities throughout that 9-month period, replenished over a period of time. That's all but finalised. The ink's not yet on the paper. Just working through the final details of it, but agreed in principle. So that will be a good achievement once it's been signed. Also, Infracore remain committed to working with Council, iwi and other local trusts to support new projects, not just by terms of employment, but also we've provided opportunities to share our role descriptions, our employment contracts, health and safety plans, and other supporting information that has allowed other organisations to be able to, I guess, leverage off of the funding opportunities that they've been provided with without having to spend that money on consultancy fees and stuff to get the people into place. So it's a nice positive contribution there. We're currently working on what I would term as a standard value proposition, almost document, so that it's there ready, waiting in the wings, so that if there are opportunities to increase our employment levels, either full-time or on a project-type basis, we can act instantly through Council, providing a clear outline of the opportunities that Infracore can provide, including starting at the top from our recruitment processes, selection processes, through to the qualifications and work opportunities that potentially we can provide people, either short, medium or long term. So that will be completed in the next month or so, and be ready and waiting for the opportunities that we're seeking. From a KPI summary perspective, KPIs have got all green delivery, all positive outcomes have been delivered there for the first time actually since I've held the role of CEO for Infracore. We put some challenging KPIs in the last statement of intent, you know, to stretch our capability, I guess. But if you look to the financial delivery, it's very much above the budget at the financial year midpoint, which is pleasing. But of course, the financial outcomes are only based upon the operational delivery and the revenue streams that are coming into us. So it's but very pleasing to see. Operational KPIs are all in the green at consolidated level. They're all in the green at individual level as well. And they're the KPI scorings that come back from the engineers within Council. They're not our internal KPIs. All of the social enterprise KPIs also report as green. Initiatives such as the Culvert programme, post-COVID-19, the corrections opportunities and the Ministry of Social, the MSD opportunities as well will count in that KPI. HSE engagement, health and safety engagement, is also reporting as green. You may remember when we presented the statement of intent last year, rather than reporting on the traditional lag indicators for health and safety, we were bringing that at the front end so that we could measure the attendance and engagement of the health and safety committees, the briefings that were being delivered to the work staff, etc., etc. The reason for that is that if you can get high motivation and high engagement levels at the front end, then the lag indicators at the other end should be positive. I'm pleased to report that the lag indicators as outcomes have also reduced injury rates. They've improved the reporting volumes so that we've got more information so we can identify risks and hazards earlier in the piece. There's a very positive story there as well. And our ISO 9001 submission, first cut has been made to Kiwi Auditing. That, of course, is intended to, or to support the fact that Infracore is committed to continuous improvement, that we have processes in place, that we have standard operating procedures, and that we run a tight business, basically. The plan for, or the pathway for that is we've presented our first cut based upon getting our house in order in the internal audits that have been undertaken. That goes for assessment. Remediation actions are probable. They come back, we correct those, goes back for reassessment again. That will take a number of months purely because of the process, but from an Infracore perspective, it's been operated in a very timely fashion, and we've met all of the key milestones. Business optimisation initiatives, which are fundamentally key to the solid financial results that we're seeing now, are just the way that we run the Infracore business. It isn't a program. It doesn't run for a set period of time, and there aren't a set number of initiatives that we work through. It just becomes a normal mode of operation, tied into the ISO standards so that we are continually looking to improve our cost structure and other metrics of the business. These are some of the things that are going on currently. They are logged. There's a program. We meet regularly at senior leadership, and we work through them, set timelines, and hold people accountable for the outcomes. Well, we just run through some of these. So the Infracore Dispatch Centre, as it is at the moment, is like a Mark 1, I suppose, of where it needs to end up. The Dispatch Centre should be viewed as the heart of the business, and the work streams and the methods of delivering those work tasks to the operators should be seen as the arteries, if you like, of the business. So the key is to get that centre pumping regularly in a good beat, getting the flow of work out to the work teams so that we can utilise the resources we've got, we can remove the waste of downtime, we can hold the work teams accountable, we can sign the work off as complete, we can invoice it through to our clients in a timely fashion. Pretty much everything we do in the Infracore business goes through that dispatch centre, so you can see the importance of fine-tuning it, if you like. The one thing that doesn't go through there, though, is the nursery. The Infracore nursery has been on a journey over the last couple of years, probably. But certainly over the last 12 months, we've introduced a point-of-sale system that allows us now to capture data. As soon as we've got data, we can work on the analysis, understand product lines, peak purchase times, weekend opening, etc., etc. All of that is in place, but it isn't really enough to get it to where it needs to be. So we're working in the background now to drive a strategy for that nursery so that we really can make an offering to the Rotorua, or the people of Rotorua, to give them something that they're actually looking for at a reasonable price. Also exploring the workflow from council into Infracore. At the moment, there's elements of it that are very much manual, emails, paper. We've got systems that can replace that methodology, that make things more efficient, I suppose. And the council on the other side, from the engineers, very much engaged in making that work. It's a big piece of work, but it is underway at the moment. The Power BI dashboard, which I've alluded to in previous meetings, that is critical from a KPI and a financial perspective. Each of our operational managers have got a tailored dashboard that they can view on a daily basis with real-time data that allows them to see where their business is sitting from a work volume perspective, a financial perspective, cost structures. There's information in there, for example, that will show the highest cost to run vehicles. You know, where are we spending that maintenance of that OPEX money? There is also a client-facing Power BI dashboard that goes back to council. We're working one to go back for the contract for Trinity as well, and that's just part of the continuous improvement. It continues to become stronger and stronger. So ultimately, midway through the financial year, key messages are ahead of budget, delivering on the KPIs, and business optimisation is alive and kicking.
Look, I'll just bring it up 10,000 feet from where Matt's been talking. I don't think you, just in case you missed that point, Matt said that we're ahead of budget in terms of our profitability. And for me, that's a real wahoo moment. You know, I don't want to sort of underplay that. It's and it doesn't come by accidentally. You know, you'll recall all the times I've sat here in front of you and sort of talked about where I came in many years ago, where we had basically a cop case to fix up. And with a real change in leadership, right from governance right through the whole team, you know, that discussion that I've had with you guys over the years about, you know, the culture changing to an organisation that understands what performance is and lifting that performance is starting to come real. And the reality of that is, you know, delivery of what we do every day is of a higher standard, but we can always improve, always admit that, but it's definitely of a higher standard where our purchasers of our services have a lot more confidence. And what we're seeing now is that confidence is flowing through in terms of, you know, revenue flow. And of course, you know, with tight cost control, better intelligence through the tools that we've got now, we're able to empower our managers on the ground to do their job a lot better, a lot more efficiently. So all these sort of things over, you know, these years, driven by, you know, a high quality exec team, are starting to come to fruition. So, you know, the result of that is, you know, a good, strong bottom line. We need that strong bottom line, so we don't want our purchases, who's disappeared out of the room at the moment, thinking that there should be a reduction in, you know, the purchasing. We need that strong bottom line to actually drive a stronger balance sheet, because our balance sheet hasn't been strong at all. And we need a stronger balance sheet, put those retained earnings into the balance sheet to give us options and flexibility to actually grow the organisation and think about where we could as an organisation go next. And for us as a board, the sort of things that we're talking about next is being able to take on contracts that actually have slightly higher risk than what we're normally used to. But to do that, we need more capability in terms of the skill sets and who we've got on our team. Because you don't want to take on risk and not have the right people who can manage that risk. And we're not quite there yet. So that'll be sort of the next path that we're putting a lot of pressure on Matt here to actually start talking with, you know, the council exec and start thinking about, you know, Infracore taking on a greater, you know, more sophisticated capability, able to take on higher risk contracts and actually be an organisation that can go the next step. So that's my sort of thinking of where the future is for Infracore. And it's quite exciting. I think it's really exciting as, you know, council here to know that you've actually got a CCO that's really starting to perform, that's actually going to have a strong future as well. And it's an organisation where, as far as the ratepayer is concerned, it's a not-for-profit organisation. It's employing as many people as you can, trying to contribute socially as well as trying to contribute on an economic level. And it's all ploughed back into this economy. It's not leaching out into other people's pockets around New Zealand or around the world. So, you know, those are really important concepts to just sort of hold and grab and embrace. One thing I would say, Bill Lawson, who's been a key part of our governance team, He's been sworn in, I think on the 14th it is. So we congratulate him to sit on Bill Lawson, so he's going to be a district judge. And, well done to him. I've always known him as someone who lends a lot of intelligence and support and comes from a completely different angle, always is the case. Very judgy, so he'll be great as a judge. But we wish him well as well. And with the process that we're going through at the moment with finding new people to replace Bill, I'm sure we'll find another couple of people that will enhance the board and we move forward with a bright future.
Cool, thank you very much. Were there any questions? Councillor Yates.
Through you, Madam Chair, I don't have a question, but I do have a comment, and actually it's a compliment. Whilst it doesn't fit into this period, I would like to especially thank Matt and Otira ki Rato or Infracore, who've acted upon 2 requests from the community, wider community at large too, to service parts of our community. So thank you so much for the expediency, 1, within which you replied, and 2, that those matters were addressed. So kia ora rā.
Kia ora. Councillor Donaldson, followed by Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John, Matt, it's hard to ask any probing questions when you get all green traffic lights on the report. So I just want to say congratulations, great report, and John, I think you summed it up very nicely at the end there, the direction that the CCO is taking. I think it's a CCO we can be well proud of. And I certainly enjoy my wanders around the nursery down there. It's looking fine.
Thank you very much. Your Worship, the Mayor, and then Mr. Waru.
I wanted to congratulate you, John, and the governance team, and also Matt. This is an astonishing report in a very challenging time that is affecting the wider community. Well done. Like the move to social enterprise and the apprenticeships, and that working very closely with our people is very valuable. I get phenomenal feedback about the nursery. That's the sort of people look that I think we all undervalued. And also our congratulations to Bill. Who are we going to put on the governance board next and lose to higher ground?
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Waru.
Kia ora, te mana. Kia ora anō, John, anō, kia koe, Matt. Hinui. Hey, just a quick question around the, in the presentation, I had the support offered to local iwi trust and local conservation groups. Just wondering which groups those maybe, or do you know, or if you can share with us some of those groups you're talking about, please?
Rotorua 15 is probably the main one that we've contributed towards. Also, Bay Conservation. Yeah, Bay Conservation.
Thank you. No, just a question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Tania. Thank you, John and Matt, for a very comprehensive, good report. I just want to touch on the social well-being of the group, and that I've followed this from day one, the COVID-19 redeployment program, and now it's closed, and we've got 3 of the temporary staff now in full-time employment with Infracore. To me, and to all of us, I'm sure that is huge. I want to congratulate you guys too, but trying to find a question. Chairman John, how are you showing our appreciation other than we doing it here as well at the meeting? I think this is tremendous. Is this going to be another program in the future?
I can answer the matter. I hope so. The reason that we're drafting the standard value proposition is so that when opportunities are presented to council, council can respond quickly without having to lose valuable time requesting us to put our information and our plan together of how we manage such a similar programme. So the desire and the appetite for there to be a repeat of it is absolute. The commitment to deliver it is absolute. And as you can see, you know, the greatest contributing factor towards all of the positive outcomes that we can report here is by having more work, that we can employ more people, train more people, provide opportunities for more people. Ultimately, you know, that's the order of events. I hope so, Trevor. So.
Thank you. Now, maybe we've got a contract district.
That's right, we do, yes.
Going back to your first question about, you know, and you're quite right, it's important to celebrate success. Just in forms of showing appreciation, I did buy Matt an ice cream the other day. So that's, you know, sort of sums it up, yeah. No, but on a more... Yeah, you did pay for it, yeah. But on a more serious note, we do make sure that the information does pass down, you know, in terms of our board, we make sure that we have quite deliberate, I do have quite deliberate walk-arounds and that sort of carry on talking to the team and just sort of, you know, making sure they understand that this organisation is going well, it's in the right direction and all the rest of it. So some of it's formal, some of it's informal, but you're quite right. It's important to be sending the message to the team that we're heading in the right direction, and we just need to make sure that we keep the hard work, keep the mahi going. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Also from me, congratulations. That's an excellent result again. And John, to you and the board, I know it's been difficult for you as well because you haven't been at full complement, so I'd also like to echo the thanks to Bill and to both you and Matt for an excellent result. And I think we've got the message here that we really need to strengthen that partnership arrangement between the CCO and Council in terms of contracting arrangements, and maybe that's something that could be worked on in terms of policy later on. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and once again, congratulations on absolutely nailing and being on track for all of your performance measures. Thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
I would now like to invite our Chief Executive of the Rotorua Airport Limited, Mark Gibb, up to speak to his presentation, and thank you very much for your patience. We are on page 30 to 35, and I believe you have a presentation for us as well.
Kia ora. Thank you very much for having me. I'd firstly just like to start by passing on the apologies from Peter Stubbs. Peter was in Auckland over the weekend, so with an abundance of caution has decided to stay in Cambridge as opposed to popping over to our lovely city for today. What I'd like to do is just cover off three areas very quickly for you. Firstly, just to reflect back on our half-year results to 31 December. Secondly, to provide an update in relation to the Airways Aeronautical Study and what the future looks like in that respect. And then thirdly, to focus in on the key actions for the company over the ensuing 6 to 12 months. In terms of the mid-year position, so look across the board, we're managing to hold on to all targets. I would say, though, with context, when COVID hit in May of last year, we did reset the entire SOI and the targets for the company, and that resulted from, at the time, what was a significant erosion in terms of international and domestic travel throughout the country. In terms of the reset from May last year, we are holding on to all indicators. I would, though, note that the domestic flight movements, ostensibly general aviation, will take quite a significant hit over the next 6 months for us, and that's driven through a company, CTCRL3, who were based in Hamilton Airport, recently shut through mid-February, and they generated as a business circa 110,000 movements a year. And in New Zealand, in context, the overall aviation system across New Zealand runs around 800,000 to 900,000 movements a year. So it's a very significant exit out of not only Hamilton, but out of the New Zealand aviation system. And a number of those smaller aircraft did utilise our circuit. They would pop over from Hamilton for 2 and 3 days a week and utilise our facilities before they'd head back. So that business is closed, is heading back offshore due to their inability to get international pilots and trainers into New Zealand at the moment. The second point, strategic project portfolio. So over the course of COVID, we ran, I suppose, an offensive defence on some fronts, and part of that, over the course of the last couple of years, we've identified a series of strategic initiatives that we believe, no matter what the market was doing, we had an ability to continue to push forward on. So those initiatives, as I said before Christmas, went through Council's SPNF, and as we sit today, we've dropped into full project plans heading towards feasibility and ultimately business case for a number of those initiatives in and around mid-year. And just to sort of quickly summarise those without getting into a great degree of detail, the 5 initiatives firstly comprise training facilities. So we're incredibly blessed as an airport and as a business to have a land holding of 105 hectares. We have a very strong relationship with National Training Centre FENZ over the road, and that offers us an ability to actually look at working collaboratively together and enhancing general airport-to-airport training facilities and expanding and exploring multi-agency training facilities across the city. So not only from an airport perspective, but from a broader economic and GDP perspective, getting extra folks into the city to train, to stay, is an incredibly positive initiative. Should be in a position to bring that together. The second related to an enhanced general aviation facility, and we're working with the Rotorua Aero Club in and around a design brief to look to stand that up, and that will become the hub for an extended GA precinct, which ultimately will hold around about 28 hangars. The third was an enhanced heliport. So there's 2 key reasons as to why we're looking to do that. Firstly, as growth and development heads out towards the airport, from a reverse sensitivity perspective, it's very important for us to ensure that the roads in the sky are kept clear, especially around helicopter movements out over the lake and back through to Tarawera. So we're doing a lot of work in and around setting ourselves up to establish those pathways. And secondly, off the back of that, if there is a change to the basic configuration of the heliport, looking to take the opportunity to reset new buildings into that. And the real opportunity there is once the board is open, as the Rotary business builds again through international tourism, to ensure we have an ability to attract more Rotary operators into the city. The fourth was around a project within the terminal. So what we're looking to do there is to rethink the approach, our approach in and around retail, and really moving towards more of a brand-centric approach in which we try and take the best of what Rotorua has on offer and to represent that more fully within the terminal. And again, to set that into a virtual shopping mall. So whether you're about to head to the airport, are at the airport, or have enjoyed your time in the city, you have an ability to connect back through to the retailers, to those iconic brands that the city has, and to build that relationship. So that's something that again, we're really excited about. And the last was what we call the FBO, fixed-based operations, which encapsulates facilities for jets. So again, we are advanced in discussions at the moment around setting up hangar-ridge concierge jet facilities, which taps into the equation around moving from a volume to value proposition, just through the nature of the type of individuals that tend to travel on those aircraft into tourism destinations. So on all fronts, we're pushing hard to progress those initiatives. As we step forward, there's further opportunities that we'll continue to pursue as we move towards trying to create a position in which the airport is more self-sustaining from a revenue perspective and ultimately less reliant on the ratepayer into the future. The next point was just around the roundabout. So again, we've continued to advocate and work with the NZTA Council and a series of other stakeholders in and around the roundabout. And that includes our neighbours over in Eastgate, Ngāti Whakaari tribal lands, also that would benefit from having a roundabout in that location. So the key message here is it's not just an airport roundabout, it benefits the broader economic and residential development aspirations of a number of landowners within the area. So again, the objective from our perspective is to ensure that that critical piece of linkage infrastructure is brought forward, which enables us more proactively to step forward and open up some of the industrial and the business land that we have zoned and good to develop within the airport precinct itself. And just the last point, in terms of where we've tracked to midpoint through the year, we've facilitated around about 82,000 passenger movements. As a reference point, that's about 61% of where we were at the same period last year. Given the ups and downs we have had through the continual escalation and de-escalation around COVID alert, we believe we'll track to around about 160,000 movements year end. So yeah, we're well on track towards that target. In terms of airways, so again, sort of not going too far back in history on this, April, early May last year, Airways expressed quite publicly an aspiration to withdraw from 7 regional airports within New Zealand. Off the back of that, as you're aware, we challenged the validity of how Airways were tracking through the court system, and we ended up arbitrating an outcome that provided the company with breathing space to look at undertaking an aeronautical study. And the aeronautical study was an independent assessment that provided a reference point for the Civil Aviation Authority to ultimately make a determination on the requirement or the non-requirement for air traffic control within our airport. Now, that report was received in final form late last week. It was taken up through a board meeting we had on Friday, and a resolution to accept the report was adopted by the board. The report itself overwhelmingly and unequivocally has determined that air traffic control is required for the future operation of the airport. And that is not only to accommodate current and projected growth, but most importantly, as a critical element to ensure that the airport meets its obligations in terms of health and safety legislation and broader aviation legislation. So the report itself has been sent to the Director of the Civil Aviation Authority, and we anticipate meeting with the authority over the course of the ensuing 2 weeks to step through a debrief of the report. From here on out, the authority will recanvass a series of interviews that we have held with aviation participants over the course of the last 6 months and ultimately make a determination. And we believe that could be within the ensuing 2 to 3 months. We would be surprised if the authority took a contrary view towards what the expert opinion within the report recommends, which again is retention of the service. And just to wrap up, if we look at what lies ahead for us, the statement of intents, we've done a lot of work in and around COVID and the impact on our cash flows. So the revised statement of intent for FY 22 to 24 was submitted through to Council on the 1st of March. We'll look to, as part of that, continue to work with Council in and around future funding and debt requirements as part of the LTP process. And really that's focusing in on obviously minimisation of contribution by Council and optimisation of our interest rate regime. The third point is advancing the strategic projects that I touched on earlier through to feasibility and business case. And certainly across all those projects, our target is to be into construction across all 5 in the period 1 July this year through 30th of June next year. So they do sit within quite a comfortable and early window. We have a big piece of work we're about to kick off with Air New Zealand and other airport users around a reset and review of our aeronautical charges. The aeronautical charges for the airport, if I look at our major customer in New Zealand, roll through on a 5-yearly review. So we're looking to embark on that process. And there's been a number of those negotiations with other airports that have been completed over the last 24 months that provide a very strong reference point for us in terms of justification of how we are looking to move forward in that regard. East side obstacle limitation surface review. So as part of the broad east side spatial planning process, one of the critical elements that needs to be considered, along with matters such as traffic, three waters, catchment management, etc., are the flight surfaces. And the reason for that is we have a series of, obviously, of hills that penetrate in areas, buildings that could conceivably penetrate through those surfaces. So we're really keen, and we've started doing it, working collaboratively with council and the broader teams to ensure that that we can fold the obstacle surface review in as part of that process. That will ensure that that when landowners get to a point of development, that the questions in and around the OLS has been dealt with early up in the process. And the last point, just to circle back on that, was the completion and moving forward of the Aeronautical Study with the Civil Aviation Authority. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mark. We have a question from Her Worship.
Sorry, thank you, Mark. And I understand Peter's also zooming in. My question really is still about the uncertainty with the Aeronautical Study and the assurance that we need to have as elected members that air traffic control is going to be guaranteed service to ensure safety for us. It's so uncertain while you're waiting for the report from the Civil Aviation Authority. We're in a bit of a state of flux, but I'll be seeking that assurance that there's no compromise to public safety. And this is an issue that's gone on for far too long, and I think it needs to be elevated once again, and I congratulate you for where you've got to, but it's rather grindingly slow, isn't it? And I also have a question about where does Air New Zealand sit in response to this aeronautical study?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, look, the process has been slow, and if I sort of reflect back on why we've entered into this, we've entered into it as a result of what in April was a very short window in which Airways had threatened to close the tower. And back at the time, the justification from Airways around closing the tower was driven through commercial pressure they were under. Since that time, it's become totally self-evident to all players here that it's really not about the money, it's around safety. And it has been frustrating that we've had to go back through what has been a time-consuming process to confirm the fact that that air traffic control is an essential part of how the airport operates, has operated and will operate into the future. So one would only hope, Mayor, that the Civil Aviation Authority take on board the clear directive from within the report and adopt it. Yeah.
We'll have to keep a close eye on that one, Mark.
Absolutely, yeah. Look, in terms of Air New Zealand, a number of players were interviewed as part of the process. Air New Zealand did not take an active part in the consultation process, despite us inviting them to be an active participant. So yeah, it was probably less than ideal. We have got a general view from them, and no doubt that will be fleshed out further by the Civil Aviation Authority over the next few months.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, Mark, just regarding the roundabout advocacy that you mentioned, will yourself, the company, and the parties you're talking with, I take it, be making submissions to the Regional Transport Plan, which is out for consultation? Hearings coming up shortly.
Yes, we will. I think that provides certainly another window of opportunity to try and get around it in advance. So based on our latest information, it's targeted between 2026 and 2028. And obviously from our perspective, we believe that's too far out and ultimately could act as a hindrance towards the future growth and development of the airport. So again, we're keen to work with all stakeholders and other parties in and around bringing that piece of infrastructure forward. We do not believe it needs to be connected at the hip with phase 2 of the Tanai Road development. We believe it could be developed as a standalone piece of infrastructure. And certainly the design work that it has been well advanced by NZT only design would certainly suggest that is a viable option.
Thank you. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much, Mark. Always enjoy your report. Got a particular question around the business area that we've got there. What's it like at the moment, like in terms of usage? And my other question is with the levels that keeps changing because of COVID, how does it affect our tenants, and what sort of leverage do we give them right across the board, from restaurants to the rental agencies? And
yeah, so look, in terms of the business hub, it's been an overwhelming success since we've opened it. Over the course of December, we've had it open to the public, and the method to sign into it is effectively through the airport app. So we're getting a number of users that are now signed up into that. Several people in the room also participated in a series of visits we had over the course of December. We had 3 Rotary groups out. We had an event for the Cycle Trust, etc. So we're finding we're getting a number of organisations that are keen to use it on a bookable basis, and we have a significant event coming up in May that we'll announce as we get closer to it, just given the uncertainty of COVID, that Egan is looking to have that facility booked for some time. So, look, I think all in all, given we were at the middle of the COVID challenge, the business hub has just proven to be a wonderful asset for the airport. And we are working with Terrace Kitchen to provide a more seamless ability to order food and beverage out of the hub. In terms of the challenges of COVID and the pressures directly on tenants through rentals, etc., the positive thing for us is that every tenant that was there pre-COVID continues to operate at the airport, albeit a number of them have suffered direct pressure. And the most obvious group of those would be the rent-car operators, and a number of those businesses have an incredibly strong reliance in and around international travel, but that has flowed through to the taxi operators and a series of others. So where required, we've been pragmatic and taken a view that the critical thing here is we continue to hold the relationship together through COVID. We'll come out the other end of this, but we don't want to see tenants falling over, through what will be a very short-term blip in a very long-term relationship that we have formed with these businesses. So if we need to, we'll be pragmatic. We'll look at rental restructure, rental holiday, just in order to keep these people floating and to keep that working relationship going.
Very good to hear. Thank you. Councillor Yates.
Kia ora, and through you, Madam Chair. Nei rā te mihi ki an koe, Mark. O tira koutou, ko tō poari. Ko tāku noiho, e pāna ki tēnei kaupara ko te Rotorua Reorua. So just on Rotorua Reorua, I'm well aware that you and some of your team have been made aware of some of the kupu that are used, and suggestions have been made to amend those or correct some of them. How are you getting along with that?
Yes, a majority of the amendments that were required have actually been undertaken pre-Christmas, and I think there's maybe another 2 or 3 signs that need to be tidied up. So so one of our team, Michelle Herrick, has worked very heavily on that particular issue. So I would hope that if we did a spell check, that we would come out with a 100% scorecard on it. That would certainly be my hope. So thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. It's been a worthwhile review.
Kia ora. There appear to be no other questions. Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you.
We now move on to page 36 for our financial performance. I ask for a mover and a seconder that the report financial performance for the 7 months ended 31st of January 2021 be received. Moved by Mr Waru, seconded by Councillor Bentley. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. I'd like to invite Thomas to overview his report and also talk to the PowerPoint that he'll be showing us today. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, councillors and board members. Take the report as read, and I've just taken a briefer version of the previous presentation. The reasons for that is that the result overall is very, again, consistent with what has previously been reported. Overall, council is now tracking about $500,000 better than budget. It's on the back of strong revenues, in particular around the rates revenue, but more so around funds from other entities such as NZTA, which is providing more funding assistance to do outside projects, in particular supporting Infracore during that post-COVID times. So while revenue is tracking $3 million better than budget, our operating expenditure as well is tracking about $2.5 million over budget to combine to that $500,000 position. Now, the majority of that overspend against the budget is a result of those additional revenues, which are supporting more activity in our operational areas. When you look at it from an activity perspective, the majority of our activities are on track or on budget, and actually the budgetary pressures that we talked about, there are a couple of underlying budgetary pressures, are clustered predominantly into two areas. The first being the planning and regulatory, where we've talked before around the parking revenues for the CBD in particular, post-COVID, and obviously the decline in activity in that area, and the retail space has obviously seen a reduction in parking revenues against what was planned. And just in the sewerage activity, we're seeing a little bit potentially developing with regards to now a reduction in trade waste volumes, and so that may be a leading indicator, a lag indicator with regards to maybe what's happening around some commercial activity, as some of those volumes are declining, and therefore those revenues that we were charging were not there. So it'll be interesting to see with regards to how that develops over the coming months. With regards to our capital expenditure, the underlying program itself is $117 million for the year. We've previously talked that there's about $43 million deferred, predominantly tied to those significant projects of the museum, the Performing Arts Centre, the lakefront, and also as well as Rotorua sewage schemes. Some of those are now well underway, but because of the timing of when they came about, we are forecasting already a significant deferment or underspend in that capital expenditure. Of the remaining 74, we're about halfway through that program of work, and in particular around the the renewal of our existing infrastructure, that is well underway and predominantly on budget. And we are, as we said, probably forecasting to be about 40-ish million underspent by the end of the year, and we know the reasons for that. And as I said before, many of those projects are now well underway. That'll obviously have a flow-on effect with regards to our debt. So we did open the year at about 231 million. In December, it was at its lowest point during this fiscal year of 216, and it has crept up slightly to 221 million. And again, that's a reflection of where our capital works program is, and in particular around the key projects that have significant spend and are obviously drawing on those funds, which are predominantly those levels of service projects, particularly around the lakefront and the Waka Forest. So overall, year to date, OPEX and the overall operating result is broadly on track. There is more revenue, which is offsetting more expenditure, but combining to be into a strong position. Our CapEx, while we know that there's about 43 million of work that was being timing changes or deferment into the next fiscal year, the remaining program is broadly in line. And debt itself is on track and where we expect it to be in light of those other positions. So full year not too much worrying us at the moment on the horizons with regards to where our operating expenditure sits and our revenues. So we expect to end the year on track or broadly in line with our end of year budget position. Our CapEx, as I said, will be significantly underspent as a result of those timing and deferments, and as a result, our debt will be less than what was planned as well, in light of those projects that were drawing on that debt being deferred or having their timing changed. And with that, I did have some COVID in slides with regards to macroeconomics. However, John McRae and Andrew probably did a fantastic job with regards to their Rotorua Economic Development presentation, so I'm happy to therefore just leave it there and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Thomas. I see we have a question from Her Worship.
Thanks, Thomas, and a good position to be in relatively to what's going on in the environment. Just a comment on the drivers of expenditure in your report. I totally accept the higher security costs given our concerns about community safety at the moment. And but the question I've got is, what's the Community Reliance Fund? Is that resilience fund that we set up?
Yes, so for Your Worship, that is the 9 million that was budgeted for this financial year with regards to the economic development activities and resilience. Unfortunately, it's one of those cases where we budgeted for it as CapEx, but we actually have to report it through as OpEx, so there's a little bit of a budget misalignment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well done.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, Thomas, just noting that for some time now the trend has been rates have been higher than budget. The revenue from rating has been higher than budget. At some point, can we get an update on the total number for the growth in rating units across the district? I don't ask you to have it off the top of your head now, but it'd be interesting to know just how many rating units we have as in total. Thank you.
We will take that as noted. Thank you very much. Mr. Waru.
Tēnā koe. Kia ora, Thomas. Just a quick question around the CapEx there. So I was just wondering what the drivers are for the deferments. Is it a financial driver, or is it they've done an assessment on whatever that CapEx may be, and they don't need to upgrade anything or do anything new right now? Or what's the drivers behind that? The deferments I'm talking about.
Good question. Actually, they're all individually different. So, as an example, Rotorua is down to the tender process and the on-site treatment with regards to the Rotorua side of the scheme, and they're obviously working through some cultural issues as well and land access issues. So those are now coming to the point where they're almost being resolved, and so that project will finish off that element. The museum is obviously tied to the peer review of the building consent, which was talked about recently with the council as well. The Performing Arts Centre was a little bit delayed with regards to the timing around its procurement as well, but as we all know, and we've seen from that building, that again, that project is now significantly underway. And the lakefront as well, I think, had a little bit of an impact post-COVID with regards to those programme of works, but again is now accelerating. So each of them have their own unique circumstances, which we're all quite comfortable with, but none of them are tied to any financial challenges.
Oh, kia ora, thank you. Happy with that answer. Kia ora.
Thank you. There appear to be no other questions. Thank you very much, Thomas. I'd like to propose that we take a quick 10-minute break right now before we come back into the operational report. So perhaps if we can come back at 1:50. Thank you. So we return and we are now on page 39 for our operational report for January 2021. I ask for a mover and a seconder to receive the operational report for January 2021. Moved by Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Councillor Wang. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. We are on page 40. I'd like to invite Thomas Collet from Business Support Group. We'll probably take the report largely as read, and if there are any questions for Thomas. Oh yes, I've got Councillor Rotorua Lakes.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I did want to ask Thomas just a quick question, and it's about when people want to, no one's put an objection to the rates. I'm not quite sure of the process there, Thomas. I mean, I know it comes into council, but who determines the validity or not of somebody's lodging an objection? Do we do it ourselves in-house, or you, or? And how do we base, a thumbs up or a thumbs down to an objection, a rates objection?
For you, Madam Chair, just to let you know, currently to date we have 86 objections, and I understand, I can't remember the date of closure, but it is coming up shortly. That number is consistent with previous years. The objections themselves go for a formal process with our valuers with regards to they obviously engage back with the individuals and talk through the issues and provide the explanations, and ultimately it falls from them. So we don't have actually any say into that matter ourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you. There appear to be no further questions, and also just for those live streaming or zooming, apologies if the sound is a little bit difficult. It was raining just a little bit hard then. A few thunderstorms, as you probably heard. So we'll move on to our operations group. Again, we'll take that report as read. We do have the group manager online on Zoom if there are any questions, and we are between page 40 and 50. So that's page 40 to 50 for our operations group. Yes, question by Councillor Bentley, and we have Jocelyn on Zoom.
Thank you. Question for Jocelyn. What type of timber has been used on the deck for the walkway?
I think I heard what sort of timber has been used on the walkway.
Yes, hey Jocelyn, I've just got Rob coming to the table and Amy, and perhaps they could answer on your behalf on the details.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kia ora. Just to answer your question, the timber used on the boardwalk at the lakefront is tonka, which is a Central American hardwood.
Okay.
Can I just add that, just in terms of my report, I just wanted to note for our councillors that our aquatic centre 50-metre pool will be open this weekend following, it's this week that it will open. The team are really excited to have our community coming back to the pool, so for any members of our community who've been looking forward to enjoying our 50-metre outdoor pool again, they'll be looking forward to seeing this weekend. Just further to that, I wanted to thank those members of those councillors and members of our boards who were able to attend our visit in February to the lakefront. Rob and Amy will be giving a brief presentation today with the aim of showing the progress for our public on our lakefront. My key message around our lakefront is that a large part of the lakefront is actually going to be returned to our community by the end of this year at Christmas. So stages 1 to 4 we expect to have completed by the end of the year. The pieces of work remaining, and Amy will talk more to this, but are stages 2A, which is our toilet block that we're currently procuring, which has a bit of planting in it, and stage 5, where the Fariwaka, more parking, more planting, more. Wanted to note also that our $41 million that's been allocated for our lakefront is made up of $20 million from Rotorua Lakes Council and roughly $21 million from the Provincial Growth Fund, which includes the $1 million cultural overlay or cultural development funding. The great thing about it is that we are really looking forward to having this available back to our community again, and it will. But stage 5 also includes a commercial building, which JP and his team are working with partners to get developed. The commercial building does not form part of the $41 million spend, and at this point has no funding allocated to it from our budget. So just wanted to clarify those things before Amy and Rob step in with the lakefront presentation today.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you, Jocelyn, and through you, Madam Chair. We thought we'd just give a quick update, not only for councillors who were able to get down there, and it was only 3 weeks ago, and I was down there this morning in similar to weather we've just experienced, and there's quite a lot that's changed, so I think it's worth just going through this, because we're really at the pointy end of a key component of what's happening down there now. Things are moving pretty quickly, it's pretty exciting, and we've got some sections that are going to be finished in the next month to 2 months to 3 months, and then, as Jocelyn said, we'll be rolling through a whole lot of other sequences with a very significant part of it completed by Christmas. So just in terms of, you're aware of the stage 1 area, which is the Hebs area. When we were down there last time, the terracing around the walls had been done, and the boardwalk that we were able to get out on after climbing across some temporary structures and things like that, and we weren't able to walk the full length, but the boardwalk's basically been finished now, so all that timber's been placed on it, and the connections to the land have been completed. The area behind the big lake wall has been backfilled, very good conditions for rolling and compacting material this morning, and they'll actually be concreting a whole heap of the pathways in the next week or so. So it's really starting to take shape. The timber's going on the tukutuku bridges, so the connections of that boardwalk to the land, that's all being done. The Fariwaka Building at that eastern end that we walked past when we went to have a look at the sort of the area, the more ecological area down there, the Fariwaka Building's been removed, and there's some stormwater work going in there and the connections to the land. So it's all moving along pretty quickly. It's still on schedule for completion in May, and we're still tracking on budget really well. So the COVID hit was mentioned there. Certainly the contractors there have been playing catch up, and they're doing pretty well in accelerating the program and making some good dents in it. So that first stage is going along really well. We're really happy with that, and the relationships with HEB's been excellent, and it's all driving along to be able to be used into the June-July period. The other area that you would have seen, stage 4, which we basically were only really able to stand at the entrance and have a look at the northern end and looking back into Memorial Plaza. So they've completed all the work with the concrete structures and everything in there. All the planting area is done, and they're rolling and setting up the contours for the actual sort of parking area in there. So again, that's charging along. They'll be sealing that, I think, in the next week or two. Yeah, next week they'll be putting down the AC ceiling in that, and then putting in some of the other services and cross paths and things like that. And that will be open and usable definitely before Anzac Day. In our work with the RSA that we've been doing in terms of they start their ceremony from that area, and they're very much looking forward to getting in there and being able to kick off their Anzac Day parade this year from that Memorial Plaza area. The northern section of it, if you do go down there and have a look, you'll see the sort of seating and the furniture and the bit where it interacts from the parking into the lakefront open space is all being completed. Lots of furniture in there, and that's looking really good. So the other one that is just in the process of kicking off is the stage 2, so that's the significant playground area. It's been a long one, this one, because it started with the enabling works first. So in the middle of the stage 2 area, you'll see a sequence of rings. That's where the soil was mounded up, the preload that we've had to do down there. Prior to the preload, we had to redivert a whole lot of services, stormwater and wastewater and other services that were there. So they've been diverted. The preload has now settled. That's due to start coming out in the next couple of weeks as well, I think. I'm looking at Amy because I'm just trying to think of our timelines. It's pretty soon, and that preload will be going to Kurau Park, and it's going to be placed in the approximate skate park site, because that's another area that's going to need a reasonable amount of time to settle and strengthen and be available for what we do with that later. But the rings, the play structures there, it's focused on a centre of rings. It's all around the sort of the Kurama 50-50 area, the Kuratau and things like that, and so it sort of represents rings, baskets, a lot of slide features and things like that to represent the way that the koto were caught. There's climbing platforms. There's also a half basketball court with a fantastic design on it. There's also a couple of racing flying foxes, which I'm sure will attract all sorts of age groups when it comes to be completed. And then there's also the volcanic playground area is being redone with a number of features in there to cater. So the area caters for a full age range, right from teenagers and young adults and older adults like myself wanting to play basketball or whatever, right through to toddlers and people being able to play on structures. And there's a lot of seating and landscaping and everything that's going to go in there to make that a really fantastic space. All those sorts of areas, as Jocelyn said, we're all targeting to have that done before Christmas, and that should make up a significant parcel of work completed and ready to go. And contracts let, the ones that are going very well. And again, we're sort of looking on time and on budget for that, so very happy with the way things are progressing. So I'll pass over to Amy to talk a bit more about the next stage 3 design.
Okay, thank you, Rob. A bit of a tag team here. So I'm just talking about the contracts or the pieces of work that haven't started yet that are coming up. So the last, I guess, piece of work this year that is hasn't started yet will be stage 3A, which really is just the connection between the Heb lakefront edge work and the playground work. So that's essentially grass area and concrete pathways, sort of cycleway connection and so on. So that ties the two together and is, I guess, the final piece in the jigsaw before the end of the year, and being able to hand back to our community their lakefront from essentially, you can see from the jetties to the east will be able to be used again in their entirety. So that'll be a pretty exciting milestone come December. So the intention would be to be having an opening overall sort of for that part at that time. Okay, so moving on to what is coming after that, so sort of moving into next year, we have the connection to each street, into Tanakai Street. So this is quite an important part also of the development in terms of drawing people, connecting people between each street and the lakefront development. So this bit has already been let and is sitting within the Campbell's contract, although not instructed. So I guess we will instruct that later in the year for them to carry on with that work as soon as when they've finished the remaining parts. Also within that is actually the new toilet facilities. They will be done this year, so they will be done in time for sort of the end of the year opening. And then we move on to the last part of the design, which is stage 5. And there's quite a lot going on here, so I'll see if I can make the pointer work. You'll see, oh, there we go, that we carry on the boardwalk. So the whole boardwalk those that joined the visit 3 weeks ago got to stand on the end of the eastern end, which is where we've talked about as being sort of the quiet, contemplative, reflection type end. And this, I guess, is the more busy commercial end with, waka ama happening down here and other water sport activities, your commercial activities, your jetties and so on. So that boardwalk will be continued. We do have a new space for commercial operators and food and beverage. As Rob mentioned, this is not the footprint in terms of we've marked it out, but the actual investment is not part of this project. There's a separate piece of work that Jean-Paul Gaston and the RED team are working on to look for investors and tenants for that space. Obviously, we have some tenants in terms of the existing operators who would move in there once that was finished, but in the meantime, they will be actually housed until such time as a new development's available and moved to this space here to enable the work to carry on the headland around the boardwalk and so on. Another important feature is the Fariwaka Building. So this here will house the Te Arawa Waka Toa, which is currently sitting at the EEC. So that is a purpose-built shelter, I guess, which will be showcasing that very important taonga for Te Arawa. We have an important part for our operators is making sure that we've got good drop-off facilities, particularly for buses and so on, which is close to their current operations and potential future operation area. So we've worked with them to ensure that meets their requirements. Obviously, lots of dedicated parking, quite a change from sort of having people parking on the lake edge and lots of car movements in and around here. We're really trying to keep the cars away and make this a more passive, a more on foot, on bike, on whatever type of recreation space. Just trying to see if there's anything else that we really need to point out. Have I missed anything else, Rob, in terms of that? Yeah, so I guess this is currently this concept has been approved and is now moving its way into detailed design phase with some various traffic assessments in terms of turning circles and parking and so on, and engineering assessments in terms of the boardwalk, etc. So we're sort of moving on to hoping to start this work, or planning to start this work just after the middle of the year. And we'll be moving that through and working on that next year also.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Her Worship.
I did take it down again, but I will ask, because you just answered the question at the end, Amy, about the parking, and thank you for taking into account those that want to go and park and contemplate and look out over the water. I understand that there is an area around that eastern end in Sulphur Point, and that's something that not as many now ask us about, but that's one. And the other one was the cultural overlay of the work of Lionel Grant. I'm really thrilled that he's in there working with Te Arawa. I think that is very important to keep those sort of heritage elements together when we look at any major project, and that is going to be a very important feature down here about telling our story. So this has got the wow to it, and it's just about the community knowing of the journey, so I'm glad you reported today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Yes, thank you. Can I ask, in the area that you talked about, Amy, where we're wanting to attract investors and that, always from the beginning of this major project, I thought here's an opportunity where might be a good-sized restaurant there, so that at night it's still utilised, not just a day attraction. And a pike art was down there before, and that's all.
5-star.
Eh?
5-star.
Yeah, that's right. So for 5-star, are we sure we've allowed for enough room to really have most places around that I've been to, whether it's in Wellington or even in Sydney, they really do ensure that there is a lot of space to ensure that we have a good, like I said, restaurant, 5-star. Have we got enough space? Are we allowing for much space?
I'll let JP answer that, thank you.
Oh,
thank you, Madam Chair. The short answer is yes. The intention really was right from the concept start, so this goes right back to when we had our Lakefront Steering Group chaired by Sir Bob, was the intention that within the lakefront area there and really sort of providing some accommodation for the current operators was also the need to expand the offering to make sure that we had activities that served those who used the reserve during the day, but equally used the reserve in the evening. So the key push there was to make sure that there was an attractive reason for people to walk down from Eat Street and obviously find a place to get a drink and some food down on the lakefront in the evening as well. So if you recall, we went to a registration of interest to find a primary investor for the commercial building footprint. We also did some work with that investor on potential tenants, which involved obviously the current operators, but then further operators. So this is cafes and restaurants. This was all pre-COVID. So it's with COVID striking sort of last year, those investors have asked for some additional support. So we're going back through those potential operators who could be in that building and are working with them to make sure that there's a robust investment memorandum for them to consider building a building on that site. So they will be able to make a decision about the scale of that first piece of it, but it could be modular and it could be expanded. But certainly we need to have a critical mass of an investment building there, at least for the operators and at least to provide that evening destination.
Thank you, JP.
Thank you. Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Now that we're a fair way down track and eventually one day this is going to be handed over to Infracore, I assume, for maintenance, have you set an annual maintenance budget yet for this whole area?
We have worked with Infracore on all but stage 5 in terms of understanding what's required. So the stage 5 concept's only just come out, but we'll be adding that to the discussions that we've had with them. Infracore actually have the construction and contract follow-on management vegetation components to these contracts. So they're very familiar with it, and we'll be working with them on a variation to look after it. I mean, it was an area that required a reasonable amount of investment in terms of maintenance anyway, and we do understand that we're going to have a higher level of service there with a higher quality, and so we'll be working on understanding that. We don't have a completed value for the whole lot yet.
Just as a follow-up, Madam Chair, just a point of interest, you're putting a lot of concrete down there in the form of paths and that, I assume. Is that going to be sealed for future cleaning easiness?
Yes, the concrete that we have already put on the eastern edge is sealed. There's a variety of finishes, but they are sealed.
Thank you. Councillor Yates.
Kia ora, korua, Utsira, kia koe ana hoki, Jocelyn, and through you, Madam Chair. On slide 6, there's a treatment that appears to come across the road where Terrace currently is and joins up. What will happen there? So that's your stage 2A, sorry, on that slide. Yes, right there.
I can confirm for you, I'll go back and check, but it looks like a raised crossing, which would be consistent with connecting that space. This design was done before my involvement on the project, and as we haven't kicked that bit off yet, I haven't sort of got into the nitty-gritty, but if that's not correct, I'll come back and confirm that for you.
Thank you. I was just wondering if it might have been a road closure as opposed to a road crossing. But
oh no,
that's
certainly still traffic flows absolutely through Round Lake Road. There's no intention to change that.
Thank you. Good question. Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Madam
Chair, I'm just following on from Councillor Bentley's question before about the use of the hardwood, and I think that I'd asked this question before, but now that we've got an opportunity, because we're now in a concept design, are we now going to be true to our Wood First policy and make sure that right from the outset that we are using Rotorua wood or New Zealand products as opposed to South American hardwood?
We did try to use New Zealand products, and there was work done with Scion and with other suppliers into the market for the boardwalk. So the specification requires a very strong, structurally strong and durable hardwood, and New Zealand, I guess, pine doesn't meet that specification, and we looked for other potential New Zealand species that were available. In terms of I guess, available, milled and able to be used to meet the requirements, we were unable to find any, hence using going offshore, so still having the wood look, intention, feeling in essence, but unfortunately not being able to provide a New Zealand grown situation. So that will carry, the requirements for the boardwalk will be the same in terms of the new extension. Obviously, if we can use it in other places, we would.
I'll just ask JP to provide some further comment on that question too. Thank you, Councillor Kaifong.
Just adding to what Amy has said, we did spend an extensive amount of time trying to research and work with options that would allow us to source something within New Zealand. So working with Scion, there was some work about what were the equivalent strength or as close to the equivalent strength wood. And so it was identified, I think it's a gum, I think it was blue gum. And so there was also using Scion's ability to tap into available wood lots around the country. They identified some potentials, but we would have had to have purchased, felled and let rest for close to a year a significant amount of timber. And so it was one of these issues where we spent a lot of time trying to research whether there was an ability to do something within New Zealand. There was no wood lots of that size, certainly within the Bay of Plenty. I think it was a far north we would have to have gone to find that woodlot. So at that point, with all the uncertainty about acquiring multiple woodlots or multiple areas, the felling requirements as well as the milling and the transportation, it was a view that we could specify better. So it was a project decision about the risks involved, and again reaching that standard of the quality that you get from Tonka.
Just one supplementary question then. So what is the difference in the engineering specification or the design of this that's different from, say, jetties or wharves that we have in Rotorua Lakes that we actually now require such a strong strength timber?
This boardwalk was designed to be able to carry heavy machinery. And the intention is that if we need to manage lake weeds and things like that, we need a structure that can carry the right sort of equipment. And it was also as part of the whole scale of, this is a lot bigger than a jetty that we've currently got, and the scale of it too in terms of its design for, we talked about wave uplift and everything like that, and the weights required. That was why we've ended up with this product. It's much stronger than we would normally need.
Thank you. Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, and interesting about the weights you expect to carry. Exactly what sort of weights do you expect to be the maximum minimum on there?
We've been asking, we've got Tonkin and Taylor to look at it. It was initially planned for a 7-tonne machine. We realised that there's issues with the way that the structure is actually created with its scoop out. So we're currently looking at a 2-tonne machine that is able to work on it with other trailer-fed units to be able to pick anything up that it might need to be able to then carry it back off the boardwalk.
Thank you for clarifying. Were there any further questions? Yes, Mr. Waru.
Yeah, just a quick one. Ki te nā koe te te amana. Kia ora, kia ora, Amy. Me koe hoki JP, jumping in on there as well. Just on that, he atāhua. You know, can't wait to actually see the finished product. Just a couple of, especially when I know he mea, tākoha tēnā whenua ngā tūpuna o Ngāti Whakauē. So I'll just chuck that one in. But the preload, just going back to the preload there, how much preload did you have to use for, when I look at the structure and what's actually on there, seems a bit hard out, don't you think?
From recollection, and I'm happy to go and source that, I think there's about 2,500 cubic metres, 2.5 or 3.5. I think it was 2.5 that we were talking about transferring to Kurau Park, but we may have a bit more than that now. The preload was put on, everything settles, and then what gets taken off is the new shape that we need. So there's more put on, more gets put on than taken off. You know, and it's all being calculated. You know, it's the engineers having their fun and working out how much they think it's going to settle. It actually probably has settled slightly quicker than we were originally expecting. So they've been tracking it. It stopped moving and it's ready now to come off to allow building on top. And of course, what goes on top of it, the weight of that is calculated as well, so that we're not, you know, mucking about with however many tonnes go on top of that land.
So I assume the preload that you're taking out to Kurau Park probably be used for the area where we're going to put this, I don't know, restaurant or commercial area.
Yeah.
So the commercial area we are looking, we're about to so JP's group is looking at engaging an architect to look at a design for the commercial space to be able to, you know, potentially put in front of like a preliminary design to be able to talk to what are we talking about in that space. But the brief will very much be making it as light as possible, the lighter footprint as possible, because the ground there is very soft. So in parallel, we'll be engaging a geotechnical engineer to understand whether or not preloading is required or whether you could get away with some kind of piling situation and so on. But so that hasn't been determined yet, but I know our Veros, who are looking after the project for us at the lakefront, are factoring in the idea of, you know, what if we did need to preload and so on. But timing-wise, we're ready to go to unload, and Kurau Park is a great location. It's been quite a win for the project because originally that wasn't sort of factored in, and it does cost a few, you know, to bring preload in. So it's actually to be able to use it and have no extra cost to council for transporting it to a location that we want to has been fantastic. Yeah, so that's Campbell's have contributed that. They've essentially said, look, they'll move it to there instead of taking it off site and you know, at no cost to us to have it there.
No, thank you. I want to apologise because I just assumed that the plans had already been made for that commercial footprint. So, one more part. You mentioned the lakeweed. Now, so are you telling me there is a plan for the council, or this council has a plan to keep that area nice and clean? Yes. And I'll tell you why I'm asking.
Yes, we understand that. Yeah, you know, it's going to need a higher level of service than was currently there with the new development. There are a number of ways that lakeweed can be managed, and it can actually be managed even before it gets there in terms of what's been happening in the water. And so we'll be working on actually the equipment needed if it does end up, and how we can get it in the embayment behind the boardwalk section, you know, where the embayment's cut back. That's set up to be able to get in there to get the necessary rakes, so to speak, excavator rakes to get them out. And basically we'll be working with the regional council on how we can manage it even before it gets there.
So I assume that applies to the Ruapeka and Ohinemutu as well?
As in lakeweed coming ashore in those areas?
Cleaning up.
It depends on what our consent allows us to do, and at this stage we have a consent for work in that area. We don't have a consent for work in those other areas.
I don't know if I'm out of line here, but keep in mind the Ohinemutu Ruapeka when you're doing your consent. Kia ora.
Thank you. There appear to be no further questions on the lakefront. Oh, last one, Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. As we're getting more information, which is tremendous, all the stages, they're just falling into place. So this, just a question on that commercial area that we were talking about, JP, earlier. Is there an opportunity for, like, all the operators who operate down there might be on one floor, and it might be a top floor for a restaurant? Is that a possibility?
The information we've had, and it goes back to the ground conditions, is to create an investment property there and to receive a return on investment. So that's the intention, is that a commercial building can be built there and operated. The information we've had is the ground conditions would make it almost unfeasible to go to a second story because of the weight of the foundations that creates. So it's quite a significant issue. You've obviously heard about our level of preload for a playground. So again, I suspect we will have to do some preloading, and we will have to ensure that, as Amy pointed out, the building is a single-story light structure.
That's why we need as much space as possible. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Rob and Amy, for the update on the lakefront. It is very exciting that this will be ready for our families and our locals by the end of this year. So thank you very much for all of your work. We will continue with the operations group report. So we are between page 40 and page 50. If there are any questions, we have Jocelyn online, and we do have a number of her managers here with us as well to answer any questions. Mr. Waru.
Kia ora. I'm back. Just wanted to talk about, I don't know whether it's, I don't know, because I was going to mention it when Matt was giving his report for Infracore and stuff like that, but I want to talk about Kauai and the program that's there in terms of the maintenance program. There have been some kōrero thrown back this way, as if I'm in charge of it or something, but I'm not. Around just how it's managed. The maintenance, we're always getting this thing around, it could be done a bit better. No, I'm only giving you the kōrero I got, it's not my own kōrero. And also the times in which, of recent, there have been some mate, and they were told, they need 48 hours. Out there, need 48 hours notice to get them to do the mahi, to dig our graves and all like that. Well, it doesn't always work, that kind of thing for some of our whānau. So just wanted to put that forward and see who they can go to or something like that, what the process is around maybe changing some of that stuff or sorting some of that out. Kia ora.
Kia ora. I'm happy to take that, Jocelyn. Kauai Cemetery has a trust board that has four Whakaui representatives on it. With Kauai Cemetery, we have a contract condition with Infracore that they manage it at a level of service equivalent to any of our other cemetery spaces. So Rotorua Cemetery at Sala Street and Kauai Cemetery have the same level of service required for how they're managed. We have frequent interactions and discussions with Infracore through our auditing process around making sure that things are kept on track and all the work that they do for us. And usually if there is concerns, they come to us through the Kauai Trust Board. Then we will report to that board on frequency of audits and outcomes of audits and things like that. But I mean, Infracore are always willing to hear information like that, and in particular areas, so we can work with them. Your other point about the 48 hours, that's an ideal situation. It doesn't have to be 48 hours, and during midweek it can actually be a very short period of time. The times when we do get the odd, not panic, I suppose, but we get pressed for time as if something happens over the weekend. If there's no notification by Friday night, but someone wants a burial on Sunday and people have gone on their fishing trips or things like that, that's when we do have some issues. But in nearly all cases, they're able to be managed. But I know it causes concerns for families, understandably, in a time of grief, and Infracore work pretty hard to try and minimise that. So I'll take that korero to the trust and let them know. And I'm going to talk with others here today about it.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you very much. Councillor Maxwell, did you have a question?
It's going to be, if it was helpful, I'm on the Kauai Trust Board as well, but the three Ngāti Whakaue reps, Monty Morrison, Leo Rika, and one other thing.
Mercia.
And Mercy, of course. So often it's Monty who he has the phone number direct to the people concerned for any of those arrivals. I know it happened one time last year where somebody came up from Palmerston North and had not informed.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. I think that's been well explained.
Yeah.
Were there any other questions for this section? There appear to be none. Thank you very much. We now move to our infrastructure group. I'd like to invite our group manager, Stavros, to the table. We are on page 50 to page 58.
Through you, Madam Chair. I will leave the report as read. I would like to make three notes in terms of the complexity or the key nature of the report. One is that we continue to work with NZTA on a number of programs, both the East, Central and West, and some of you probably you've seen recently also an announcement about an extension of shared paths from Hamurama to Osakiri Falls, which is in progress at the moment for consultation, and that continues to be the case. NZTA were supposed to be here today for a presentation, but because of the COVID and their presence in Auckland, a lot of their offices, we postponed until April next month, and they'll come to make a presentation to you. The second element of intense activity we have at the moment is that we're dealing with quite a significant number of land development proposals. And of course, those proposals both to the east and west and intensification projects rely heavily on us giving effect to our master plan for water supply, sewage management, and especially stormwater master planning. So these are significant areas of activity in addition to our normal business as usual processes. The other element of work that it occupies quite a significant chunk of our time and resources at the moment is a participation together with a lot of our staff and our regional colleagues onto the Three Waters proposed reforms that's been led by the Department of Internal Affairs in Wellington. And I understand also on the 26th of March, there will be a workshop where elected members will be fully briefed about the status and the progress of that government proposal for Three Waters reforms, and obviously in due course we will provide to you recommendations and direction and suggestions as to how we respond to that to that process. As for the rest of my reports, I will leave it as read, and then happy to respond to questions you may have. Thank you. I've noted Deputy Mayor's question earlier, so if Madam Chair, would you like to give some direction to what the question is again?
Yes, I think we'll deal with that matter first and then go into the operational questions. So I'll throw it back to you, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to refresh the committee's memory, there was an email come out, I'm assuming, to all councillors and board members that there had been, and again, I congratulate Stavros, you and your team over the transparency, that there had been a broken wastewater pipe close to the pump at Nongataha near Parawai Road, that there had been a leak, and as soon as it was brought to council attention, it was the crews were onto it from Trinity Council and Fulton Hogan. And the regulator regional council were advised. What is said in the pānui that came to elected members was staff are investigating the cause of the break. It appears to have been caused by unintentional damage some time ago, and the main has gradually deteriorated. This is not something staff could have predicted. There is a systematic condition assessment undertaken for critical pipes, and a significant failure as opposed to a local break like this is unlikely. However, what was put out as a social media post by a councillor was something quite contrary.
Yes, Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I raise this point of order because neither Councillor Reynold McPherson is here to defend himself, nor should I think that it should take up valuable council time. This could be deferred to a time when Councillor Reynold McPherson is available and dealt with, and if he has to apologise, then so be it. But to now discuss that over here and try to crucify based on...
Councillor Kumar, I understand where you're coming from, and when it was brought up in urgent items, I too said that I felt uncomfortable that he was not here. However, that's not a point of order, so I will allow Councillor Donaldson to carry on, because actually the point of order that is really on the table is that there's been misinformation shared by a councillor, and that's quite a serious matter. So while we will ensure that Councillor McPherson, it is unfortunate that he is not here, is able to at some stage be able to provide some perspective as to why he chose to mislead the public, then that is completely fine. But I will allow Councillor Donaldson to continue his explanation of his urgent item earlier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, look, I'm not going to go into the full inflammatory narrative of the post. Just simply, I ask Stavros to clarify this will respond to this statement. The pipe broke because our council has not invested enough in maintenance. And then it goes on to say why we haven't. But just why did the pipe break is the question, Stavros, and why, what underinvestment in maintenance has there been from this council? Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you, Madam Chair. I have noted the comment, in the social media too by an elected member. However, what I want to say very clearly, the statement is plainly incorrect in this respect. The incidents that occurred on Tuesday night and was rectified by 4:35 o'clock in the morning resulted, to the best of our knowledge at this point in time, from what we believe is to be an unintentional hit on the pipe by the installation of a private stormwater pipe. That stormwater pipe was installed. It appeared to be in conflict with the main sewer line, and whoever installed the private stormwater pipe attempted to go under the pipe. And as part of excavating, it appears that some surface damage to that asbestos cement sewer pipe, occurred. As it is usual, when you scarify a little bit of the surface on an AC pipe, gradually moisture gets into it and eventually creates a crack or a hole into the process. The condition of the asbestos cement sewer pipe has been assessed a few years ago. Is found to be in fit condition for another 20 years of operation. The signs for a deteriorating condition of a rising main would be a collapsed pipe, a collapse or concaving of the pipe, a thinning of the walls, or a gradual seepage that would lead to an eruption or a rupture of the pipe. None of them with evidence. It was a very clean, cut, point rupture onto the pipe. It was identified. The response processes were in place. the response approaches, were as expected, and the right notifications to everyone concerned have been issued, and the repairs were affected by the early time of the morning. What I would like to note, and I think it is quite important to emphasize, that Council owns and operates a significant number of infrastructure networks. Every day we attend to and repair hundreds of elements in our networks. The reality is that we will always going to have those repairs, both some proactive, some reactive, and some renewal processes. I think the statements in terms of lack of maintenance into the is unfortunate, and I think it's also incorrect to some degree, because remember that the report you've got in front of you from infrastructure outlines a whole range of programs of maintenance, renewals, and upgrade works that testifies to a systematic investment in all these elements. It identifies about $20 million of renewals in our infrastructure networks, about $25 to $30 million of maintenance, and a few dozen of millions of dollars of upgrades of the network. So therefore, the connotation that we're not investing in a systematic way to that, it's incorrect, in my opinion. And also, I would like to remind elected members that when we were discussing the allocation of the performance specified in operations contract for the wastewater services, it was very clear the intention to transfer a lot of the risk into the operator in terms of critical mains, to Trinity. It is Trinity's and our main contractor's responsibility right now to evaluate and assess the condition of the pipe further, because really the risk lies on them. They have to maintain the functional position because it is part and parcel of their contract. So that's my response to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for correcting that information, Stavros. The main point of me wanting to discuss this further in your agenda item is so that we are able to correct what has been incorrect information going out to the public. I've also asked JP if he could provide some comment. There was another statement in there regarding switching of funding that perhaps JP or actually even Thomas could comment. But before that, JP, I can see that Steve wishes to provide a supplementary comment on this or a question.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for allowing this discussion to take place, because this has got a high material impact on a council officer who I see clearly his reputation is impugned and he cannot answer personally as an officer other than to correct the record. So there are two questions that remain for me, because there are two members here of the organisation that the administrator posted this post that is clearly factually incorrect. And I still maintain that one of them should advise the chair of that organisation to please take down that post, and I want all councillors to be able to see the entire post in the minutes of this meeting. And also, we should ask the Chief Executive what is our next line of action. For me, I believe it's a formal complaint about the administration of the website, but also my question is to JP, so I've got two. One to the Chief Executive would lead a formal complaint in order to protect our council officer's reputation, where he has incredibly high standing. And the other is, what is the material impact, JP, on the reputation of council's network? So this is quite scurrilous in my view, and I'm not letting it get away because Councillor McPherson's not at the meeting. So rather than naming names, I think we've got some very big issues to deal with as elected members to make sure, one, we seek the truth before we do any posting of information, and we protect council officers. So JP, could you answer the material impact on our reputation in terms of infrastructure, and then our executive to answer what avenue we can undertake?
Thank you, Steve. I'm actually going to ask Jeff, given the seriousness of this, if he could please provide comment. Thank you, our Chief Executive, Jeff.
Tēnā koutou katoa, Gauranga Tēra mā tēnā koutou, kia ora koutou. Look, it's rather unusual for me to be sitting in Zoom land and not directly there. What I would reflect on is that you've heard a lot today about the work and activities of Council. And the reason we do this reporting is to ensure that the general public is able to receive from the organisation and from councillors factual and accurate information as to the work that Council undertakes. It's therefore extremely disappointing that the comments that have been made in this Facebook page are neither factual nor accurate. And you would actually forgive a member of the public to have some serious misgivings about an organisation that was not funding, as has been asserted, was not funding infrastructure because funds have been diverted elsewhere. Now that's totally not correct. From a staff point of view, clearly this impugns staff reputation, and it also undermines the whole organisation's reputation, which has got an impact when we are trying to partner with external agencies, with iwi, and with our community. So it's critical that this sort of information or misinformation that is actually put right. From an individual staff point of view, it is actually extremely frustrating. You don't hear this from staff, but our people work extremely hard and they're very committed to this organisation and our community. And of course, being accused of wrongdoing when you're entirely innocent and having a total inability to address those sort of comments results in dissatisfaction and a drop in commitment. So we need to actually make sure that this matter is actually addressed carefully. As to how to do it, well, we've got a clear process. It's the code of conduct process. I'll certainly be having discussions directly with the chair and the mayor, but there is for either a member around the table, the chair or the mayor, to actually take the lead with regards to actioning a code of conduct action. The first steps of this are very obvious, and that there needs to be a discussion with Councillor McPherson, and he will be obviously given the opportunity to withdraw the post and to issue a statement correcting the misinformation that he's been provided, or he was providing, and then secondly to also issue an apology.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Just as the chair, it is very disappointing that we don't have the councillor involved around the table to have this discussion and have this matter resolved. But I do agree that the staff or this organisation or anyone who found offence from that post deserves an apology. So while they won't get that from that councillor today, as the chair, I would like to apologise on his behalf for any offence that that post may have brought forth. This organisation certainly operates with the highest of integrity. We see that in our staff every single day, and it is disappointing that that has been misrepresented and that it's actually out in the community by misinformation from a councillor who should know better, that this organisation is not acting to the best interests of our locals, which is what we do every single day and we feel very passionately about. So thank you. I've also just sought some quick advice from our democracy manager on what the next steps will be. We will have it noted in the minutes as requested by Her Worship, and as Jeff mentioned, we will, by the sounds of it, have to go through another process where there will be an official complaint, and we will deal with that in a time which we can with the councillor involved. So thank you very much. I think that's all that we need to discuss on this matter. I would also like to point out that not only what Councillor Donaldson raised, but there was also a comment about the ability to switch money to different projects. I think we heard that quite clearly from Jeff as well, that that is not something that has happened and not something that is able to happen, where tens of millions of dollars are shifted from one project to another. We have very robust processes and we follow those. So yeah, thank you very much, and apologies to you, Stavros, for having to deal with this matter in what should just be a very business as usual group manager overview. So I'd like to turn our attention back to the operational report, back to the infrastructure group, and ask if there are any further questions from page 50 to page 58. Yes, Mr. Waru.
Tēnā koe te tiamana. Kia ora, Stavros. You know, I can't help it. I have to try and come up with a question every time you sit there. So, you know, trying to bring a bit of light to the kaupapa, wa tērā kaupapa taumaha, tērā, engari. I've just been asked, well, recently, around the roundabout works at Mongotaha. I'm not too sure of your involvement exactly in that kaupapa, but I suppose we're asking for assurances that the project isn't encroaching onto tribal lands, whenua.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
What?
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes, Your Worship. What's your point of order?
Yes, Councillor Kumar is texting, and we are asked to leave our phone side. And
Sorry,
I'm
that's...
concerned that is going outside of our meeting today.
That's not quite a point of order. Raj is showing his phone, which has no messages, so we'll carry on. Thank you. Sorry.
I was going to say, I thought it was on me, hey. But you got my question there, Stavros. Kia ora.
Yeah, kia ora, Mr. Waru. And no, I can assure you that the Waka Kotahi NZTA, in executing the project, obviously they have taken appropriate legal surveys, and the boundaries of what's private and public property to deliver the project. So I would be extremely surprised, if there were any anomalies in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Stavros. Were there any further questions? There appear to be none. Thank you very much. We now have our Manahotu Māori report. I'd just like to take that report as read. It's quite self-explanatory, and ask if there are any questions. And welcome Gina to the table. Mr. Waru.
Kia ora, I'm full of questions, Dinera. Kia ora, Gina. Just a quick kōrero around the wānanga e haumaini, because we spoke about it briefly yesterday, and a little kōrero with Stephen and Jeff, but I'm not too sure if everyone's aware of their kaupapa and who it is actually for. So could you give us a little bit more kōrero around that, please?
Are you meaning noho marae?
Aye, the noho marae.
We have a noho marae coming up at the end of the month. I think it's the 30th of March. It is set aside for elected members as well as the members of our partner boards, the community, both community boards and Te Tatau o Te Arawa. We've had pretty good RSVPs so far. There is still space, is my understanding, and we would like to encourage people to come along. The reason it's been set aside for elected members is that we wanted an opportunity for the members to be able to speak freely, I should say elected members of council and of our partner boards. It's an opportunity to speak freely and to really talk about and explore the issues around partnership and what it means for our district. Ordinarily, these noho marae are provided for staff as a training and professional development option, but this one is specifically for those elected members and partner boards. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe.
Kia ora. Yes, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora, Gina. Just asking, because I think we're getting to the sharp end, re the tenders for East Rotorua, how is the engagement with various multiple owned parcels of Māori land that need to be reticulated beneath that? I know we've employed someone to assist with that process. How's that getting along? Thanks.
So there are a large number of blocks of Māori land which have a different framework for decision making under Te Ture Whenua Māori. Those blocks of land, some of them are owned by one or two owners, some are owned by hundreds or even thousands of owners. Where that land is multiply owned, some of those blocks have decision-making structures, so they've appointed trustees or they have an incorporation with a committee of management, but many of them don't. So it is an extensive project to engage with those owners and get their confirmation that we can carry out the work on their land. There is a project team that has been pulled together by the infrastructure team, which I'm a member of, as well as Ben Manley from the Te Amorangi unit. We have had some initial hui a hapu, so we met with hapu just to publicise what is the purpose of the scheme, which is, as we know, to protect the mauri of the lake, and to outline what the work involves and how it affects them as property owners. We are beginning the process of writing to each of those owners. Our approach at the moment is to begin with the ones that are probably the easiest to work with, and the ones at the other end which are probably the most difficult to work with. So the ones that have only one or two owners, or the ones that have got no ownership structure in place and multiple owners, because I think it's important that we get some certainty with some properties and that we start the ball rolling with those that are going to take a little bit longer. We're working very closely with the Māori Land Court. We're working very closely with a number of different hapu and iwi organisations throughout the Rotorua area, just to make sure that everybody understands what we're doing and why, so that when we go and talk directly with owners, they have some context for the request. It is a huge project though.
Yeah, thank you. And a supplementary, Madam Chair, because there's considerable interest in that community about the timing of the rollout of the reticulation, so probably more a question for Stavros, but there will be some areas that can be reticulated while other areas that are held up by this process will have to wait further down the track. Am I correct in that understanding?
Through you, Madam Chair, the Deputy Mayor is correct. Remember, the main trunks are already in place. What we'll be doing once a decision has been made about awarding a contract for the installation of the pretreatment systems, obviously we can install them where it's legally feasible with owners' consents, and we can connect to the main trunks. So the installation probably will take the best part of 18 months to 2 years to be completed for 450 properties. So obviously that gives us time to work out the complexities of land ownership with these multiple Māori whenua lands. Thank you.
There appear to be no further questions. Thank you very much, Gina. We now move to our strategy group report on page 59, and I'd ask JP to give us an overview. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, and just leading off probably on a question raised by Councillor Bentley earlier on in the meeting, just about community safety and housing. So if you look at the report, I just highlighted, then I draw your attention to the workshop we had last month. So we had a community safety planning workshop, which really shaped some of the funding proposals that will go into the long-term plan consultation document. We also ran the locality planning workshop for the inner city. So again, started to give you a feel for what we'd done with the stock take review work that we'd undertaken using DCA architects, and our next steps now about consulting with the key stakeholder groups and mana whenua as to what those next steps should be. So that's really important for us moving forward with the inner city. Last month, I also gave you a comprehensive update on what was happening around the Housing and Thriving Community Strategy. Our expectation is that we'll be doing that every 2 months. So next month, I'll be coming back with a comprehensive presentation on what initiatives are underway. And as you've heard from the GM of Operations and the GM of Infrastructure, there is a significant amount of work that we're doing across the 3 areas to support housing and residential development. So it's important that we give you those regular updates so you're aware of what's happening in that space. Other than that, councillors, what I've got in here is a summary just of the child equity program across the year. So just additional detail for some of those initiatives that were undertaken. Unfortunately, Jill was not available to sort of stay to the back end of this meeting. So I would do my best to answer questions, but they may be best if there's any to direct them back towards Jill. So otherwise, happy to answer off any other questions, councillors.
There appear to be none. Thank you very much, but I do want to acknowledge the incredible work that has gone into the Child Equity Program. Looking at the report, today that's presented, those details in there just go to show the hundreds of children in Rotorua that have benefited and fortunately now been connected to the council services that we offer. So a big thank you to you, but also to Jill, please, if you could give that back to her. And we look forward to seeing the continued success of the Child Equity Program in our schools. Thank you very much. So that brings us to the conclusion of our operational report. I'll just check, do we need to go into public exclusion? Yeah, we do have, the only other thing is to pass the confidential minutes. We're able to do that without going into confidential unless there's anything that anyone wishes to raise in confidential. Okay, we'll just carry on and I'll get a mover and a seconder that the confidential minutes of the Operations and Monitoring Committee meeting held 4th of February 2021 be confirmed as true and correct. Moved by Councillor Bentley, seconded by Councillor Maxwell. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. I now declare the meeting closed.